Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that people always say about cleaner production is that, especially when you're talking to industry, is that it saves money because you're being more efficient, right? And then the question is, well, if that's the case, why isn't it happening? Why isn't industry just doing it all by itself? Why are we all here sort of telling them that this is important and useful and there's potential, et cetera, et cetera? So there really are some barriers here. Of course, yes, there's a benefit, but then there's something that's holding companies back. And actually those barriers are at several levels. One of the more important ones is that for this to really happen in a company, this is the experience that we see everywhere, you have to have the senior management of a company committed. If they're not committed, if they're not really committed to doing something about efficiency, energy efficiency, resource efficiency, whatever it happens to be, then it's not going to happen. And one of the problems is that senior management, they sort of see that it's important, but it's not really what interests them. What interests them are more strategic things, like getting greater market share, or new products, or growing the company. Efficiency as such is not something that interests them very much. And so this is where I think you need to have government come in, and government has to make it really clear that there is a national strategy, a national push for efficiency, and that they want companies, they want the senior people in companies to be involved in that. So that's one pretty important barrier. Then if you go down sort of one level lower, there's, if you want, just the problem of technical knowledge. People don't really necessarily know what their options are in terms of being more efficient, having cleaner production, and so on. I mean, I think we have this idea that companies know their technologies and their processes well. That's not really necessarily the case, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. A lot of them have, they've come into it. They're not necessarily super sophisticated in terms of technologies, in terms of engineering and that kind of stuff. So they're kind of like, if I can put it this way, they're doing by the seat of their pants. So there's a real need for building up the technical base, technical knowledge, in especially the middle-level management of a company. Because when efficiency really gets going in a company, of course, there needs to be the push from the top, but the day-to-day work is going to happen at the middle level of management. And so they need to have their capacities built up. And one of the pieces that are missing here actually is, if you want a way of approaching cleaner production so that you find what are your opportunities. And actually, this is what UNIDO has primarily been doing these last 25 years, I think, something like that. And it's not just UNIDO. There are other people who are involved in promoting cleaner production. It's actually, we're not necessarily promoting technologies or particular processes or particular chemicals or something like that. What we are promoting is a way of looking at what you're doing to see what are the opportunities. And that is actually something that's really missing in companies. They don't have that systematic approach to the whole problem. And then one other barrier, which actually goes way beyond environmental issues or anything like that, it's that, to be very honest with you, a lot of companies are not run well. Especially, again, the small and medium-sized enterprises, they don't have very good management systems. Forget about environmental management systems or energy management systems, just management systems. That is a big problem. And a lot of the inefficiencies actually just stem from the fact that they're not running themselves very well. And so if we can help them just generally run themselves better, like with, for instance, more broad tools like ISO 9000, like quality. A lot of quality actually has some, shall we say, environmental effects. If you're good on your quality, you're good on your environment. So there's that kind of work that needs to be done. And then I think there's also a problem in companies. Companies often tend to be very hierarchical, with the boss is the top, the boss decides, and everybody else just says yes. And yet, a lot of the cleaner production, resource efficiency stuff, it needs to be done really at the very bottom. I talked about middle management, but actually even the workers, the shop floor workers, they need to get involved. And actually, they often have very good ideas. but nobody's asked them. Nobody's asked them, how they think the particular process that they're dealing with could be run better. And there's a whole pool of good ideas, new things, that's just sitting there, and nobody's tapping into that because it's not part of a certain management way of thinking, which is that the managers decide and the workers just accept. And so we need also to change that. We need to think less in terms of vertical, but more kind of horizontal. I guess those would be the major barriers that I would see after the 20 years that I did on working on this.